What is up, guys? Welcome back to CageChat MMA. Before we get into the recap for UFC Fight Island 7, sorry, not UFC 2007, I mean next week, of course. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to hit that follow button if you're watching on Facebook and Twitch, of course. And now let's get into the video, of course. Max Holloway put on a Fight of the Year display already. We've only had the first event, but Max Holloway looked phenomenal against Calvin Kattar this weekend, and he put on. It was just a phenomenal performance. It was the Max Holloway that. Probably the best Max Holloway we've seen, but it's Max Holloway that we saw against Brian Ortega. You know, he was having fun inside the octagon. The first time he's looked like he's had fun in there, at least since the since the Brian Ortega fight. Sorry, and he just looked at his absolute best. And he'd come into this, not sparring as much. He'd had quite a lighter camp compared to his usual fights, the likes against Volkanovski 1 and obviously Dustin Poirier. He hadn't been sparring. And his boxing was just on point. We know how good a boxer he is. We know just how talented Max Holloway is. And we saw how tough Calvin Kattar is as well. We know both of these have very good gas tanks, both very good boxing. But Max Holloway showed that there's levels to this, and Calvin Kattar, unfortunate to be on the losing side, he will learn from it. He'll come back a lot better because obviously, he is a fantastic fighter. He just found out that, he was beaten by the better man, maybe the better version of Calvin Kattar. Maybe we'll see a version of Calvin Kattar that's quite similar to Max Holloway in a year or two, albeit there is a couple years in age difference with Calvin Kattar being 2 years of Max Holloway's senior. But yes, a phenomenal fight. We watched it on the watch along, of course, here on Saturday night, and it was the first one of the year, and boy, did it deliver. The first card on ABC, and they got given an absolute treat on free TV as well, and it went the whole 25 minutes back and forth. But I say back and forth, it was more or less Max Holloway for 5 rounds, but there's a couple of hiccups in round 3 and 4 that you could see Calvin Kattar thinking, oh, maybe he's going to set up an upset here, but he didn't quite work out like that. Max Holloway kept his composure, kept his professionalism to the point where, in round 5, he was so comfortable that he was talking to the analyst desk in Dan Hardy in DC, saying he is the best boxer, and at the same time, slipping and swerving and ducking punches that were being shot from Calvin Kattar, which was such a ballsy move. You can see, he is a fun character in the UFC. He's a fun character in MMA. He's quite nerdy in terms of, he streams on Twitch and that. But, he's an all-round good guy, and he seemed hungrier than ever before. He seemed like he had something to prove. Obviously, Calvin Kattar going into the fight, called him a freshman, said he'd had the best boxing himself. And Max Holloway put that all to bed, I think. And it showed why he's still the number one contender. Obviously, we found out that UFC 260 we will see Brian Ortega challenge Alex Volkanovski. And I think, I think it's set in now that we're going to see one of those two fight Max Holloway next. Whether it's going to be Brian Ortega maybe walking in as the champion this time, whereas the last time against Max Holloway he was the challenger, or Volkanovski makes his second defense and get the trilogy fight, which is very interesting because it's not often you get a trilogy fight where the fighter coming in is 2-0 down isn't completely out of this fight. Obviously we saw John Jones DC talked about as a trilogy bout, DC being 2-0 down, and a lot of people changing it to heavyweight to see if he'd still have a chance or have a better chance of defeating John Jones. But the whole Holloway Volkanovski scenario is a phenomenal one. Like, for example, using Max Holloway as an example, you wouldn't make Holloway Aldo 3, would you? Because of the way Max Holloway finished Aldo both times, with all due respect to Jose. But, seeing Holloway and Volkanovski 3 is something that still very much interests me. Both of them seem to gel well inside the octagon, give us two fantastic fights, albeit maybe not the most sort of exciting fights. They're both very close, very knit, tactical bouts. But Max Holloway this weekend very, very much, had one of those bouts that's going to go down in the highlight reel for him for a very long time, Still 29 years of age, still very young. And, he's broken the record, his own record, I think, in fact, for the most significant strikes thrown and attempted. At 744 attempted, 445 landed. He put an absolute clinic on. Considering he went 25 minutes and he's putting out that level of input, almost 100 strikes around. And, he pieced Calvin Kattar up. His body work was incredible as well. He was going high, going low. Those elbows were, Matt Brown-esque, as we saw in the co-main event. He competed. Unfortunately, lost to Carlos Condit, and we'll talk about that later. But boy, Max Holloway, an absolute stud. And he rightfully got a fight of the night performance, considering, both of those took it. But, he took the larger chunk of that fight of the night performance, looking so phenomenal. Whereas Calvin Kattar almost just about survived. He showed his toughness and his grit, and I feel sorry for anyone who's fighting this year who's going to have to try and beat that, because it's already. I mean, we've had one event this year, and that's going to be a tough one to beat the fight of the year. I can see us coming towards the end of the year, and that still being the number one, because of just how incredible Max Holloway's performance was. And it does throw up a little. Well, it shows that there is levels to this featherweight division. We'll take a quick look at the rankings, of course. Volkanovski still the champion, of course, taking on the number 2 ranked Brian Ortega. We're waiting for Zabit and Yair to potentially take place. That was meant to be taking place twice last year. Yair Rodriguez is obviously suspended currently. Do you book Yair versus Max Holloway, who, Yair called him out, or do you want to save Max Holloway for that title back? Because obviously he is a superstar in that division. He's the biggest star in that featherweight division at the moment. Volkanovski's coming up still, but Max Holloway has been here over, I think, a decade now, or at least close to a decade. So he's been here a long time. He's a household name for the UFC, and he does, he does bring a huge following to the sport, because he is quite charismatic, quite fun a guy to watch, and he's fantastic inside the octagon. Obviously, you got Calvin Kattar, who's on a loss now. I think you put him up against the Korean Zombie, both coming off losses. Maybe give him Josh Emmett. When Josh Emmett returns, both of those two would make a good fight, fantastic fight. Both of them don't, back down that easily. Both have great boxing. It would be a similar fight in terms of styles, as it was with Max Holloway and Calvin Kattar. Very much a stand-up battle. Neither of these two spent any time on the ground, Max Holloway or Calvin Kattar, this weekend. And we will take a quick look, of course, at the statistics. As we mentioned there, 445 significant strikes out of 734 landed, 746 strikes attempted, 447 of them landed. No, that's just an incredible output for Max Holloway. 134 landed for Calvin Kattar, 133 significant strikes out, 283. So you can see where the fight was won and lost. It was completely the output from Max Holloway. Everything he threw, he pretty much hit, whereas Calvin Kattar was certainly missing more than he threw. And that was more down to Max Holloway being phenomenal with his movement, phenomenal with his timing and his pacing of the fight as well. And we've seen how good he is over 5 rounds and how he can keep that pace up for 5 rounds. And he showed that at his very best this weekend. But yes, Calvin Kattar's stock hasn't gone down at all. I think it's just Max Holloway's has just gone up that little bit even more, because what a way to start off the year. But yes, moving on to the co-main event, of course, we had Matt Brown versus Carlos Condit. Matt Brown. Condit was in the red corner, and the two OGs put on a fantastic bout. It was one, you see a lot of these times when you get two fighters in the cage together. This is mainly at the heavyweight and or the heavyweight divisions, where you might get a good 5 minutes and then it teeters out for round 2 and round 3. But these two, gave us an incredible fight. It was a gritty fight, and maybe one you should have expected from Condit and Brown. Both of them had phenomenal striking. Both of them have had great ground game as well. There was the first round when Matt Brown was controlling the ground game on top of Condit. Condit changed it in the second and third round and won the ground game in there. And I think the striking game almost slipped as well. Now, it was given a 30-27. I disagree with that. Just slightly. I think it was 29-28 Condit. I gave them round 2 and round 3 because of his control time. But I do think Matt Brown won that first round, especially with his control time as well. Albeit Carlos Condit came out with some fantastic striking. Like he hurt Matt Brown. But, these two are warriors. These two are fighters at heart. And they certainly continued that in that vein and gave us an incredible co-main event, which was worthy of the co-main event spot. And obviously we'll take a look, of course, at the statistics. Of course, 157 strikes, 209, 37 out of 52 for Brown, 39 significant out of 88 for Condit, and 2 takedowns. He had a 50% takedown ratio on Saturday night, of course, whereas Matt Brown only had 1 out of 6, and I think that's where you see the fight was won and lost as well. I think there's 2 takedowns in round 2 and round 3 who really won the fight. Neither of them had that good of a plan on, once they were on their back, how to transition out of that. Now, Condit had some beautiful transitions in the fight, a couple of takedowns. That trip was sublime, and you saw Dan Hardy, comment on that and how beautiful that was. And you saw him last night even call out one of Condit and Brown, saying he wants to return against his elder statesman. in the welterweight division, but he called out 4 names: Diaz, Brown, Condit, and Diego Sanchez, who's obviously having one more fight before he retires. And they're all fantastic bouts for the Outlaw to return to, and hopefully that's something we'll see in 2021, because obviously he's one of the best analysts that we've got in the sport, and one of the best commentators that we've got in the sport. And it'd be interesting to see, because we know he's not done with his career mentally or physically, because obviously he had that taken away from him due to the injury, being told he shouldn't be competing anymore due to the heart injury or heart condition that he was suffering at the time. But he definitely should come back for one more, I reckon. And any of those ones, I think the Diego Sanchez one makes the most sense. But again, if you want to do Carlos Condit versus Dan Hardy, I'd be down for that. The only question mark, I guess, is Carlos Condit is now effectively a free agent. He thought on his last fight on his UFC contract last night, of course. So it's just whether do we see him in a Bellator, a PFL maybe. PFL in that welterweight division would be class. Him up against like a Rory McDonald or someone like that. I think that would still work very nicely. But again, a fantastic fight. And Carlos Condit, the natural born killer, of course, getting the win and looking good in it as well. It was a good, solid fight. Now, this card was very decision heavy, but we did have three phenomenal finishes in a row. And unfortunately, Santiago Ponzinibbio came back after 2 years out, didn't get the win on Saturday night after what was a beautiful left hook, Conor McGregor-esque left hook there from Jingliang Lee. I keep butchering his surname, so I just call him Lee for now. But yes, he did look good. Ponzinibbio didn't look too bad. He looked maybe he was a little bit rusty. Obviously, he's come back 2 years into the game. Obviously, training during COVID times as well, which isn't, as good as it can be. It'd be interesting to see how his training camp had been. If it's like a normal, had there been, multiple changes due to COVID. But he did put on an okay performance. But Lee did clipped him very nicely, and it was all she wrote for that one. But again, let's take a look at the statistics. Of course, Xing Liang defeated Ponzinibbio, of course, 11 to 18 strikes versus 21 to 50. So 10 more strikes now there for Lee, of course, and he got the first round KO. I think they gave it in the last few minutes of round one. And it does throw off a bit of a spanner at works, doesn't it? Because obviously Ponzinibbio was one of those that's touted for the welterweight title or to be a contender for that welterweight title in that division. And Lee getting a win over him was probably see him put into the contender rankings come Tuesday. I don't know how high up he'll be, whether it'll probably be 14th or 13th. But, he put himself back in winning ways, Lee. And he did it in a very phenomenal fashion as well, because obviously, putting out Ponzinibbio out in the first round deserves all the plaudits, albeit, even if Ponzinibbio's had a tough 2 years. Now, this puts us on to Jacqueline Buckley versus Alicia Di Chirico, who, put the lights out of Buckley, unfortunately. But I say unfortunately, it was a phenomenal performance there from Alicia Di Chirico, but the breakout star from 2020, Buckley, who's now 2-2 for wins and losses, all four of them, should I say, finishes, of course. 2 knockouts on Kevin Holland and Di Chirico, and then obviously beat Jordan Wright. And Empik Sangane, of course, with the spinning back kick that, was, I think, knockout of the year. It should have been knockout of the year, at least, if it wasn't. But Di Chirico coming in, the Italian, getting the job done. And Jacqueline Buckley just got caught. He thought the kick was going low, but it came high. Well, actually, it was kind of mid-range. He ducked just as the kick came in, caught him flush on the chin. Very similar to how Valentina Shevchenko knocked out Jessica Rai, of course, with that kick. They keep going low. You're expecting the low kick to come in, and it goes slightly higher than your guard. You're expecting Jacqueline Buckley who's going in for the takedown as well. Similarly at the same time, and Di Chirico just connected on the chin phenomenally. But he didn't make himself too much liked in the press, saying that, in his post-fight interview, asking why only the winners get interviewed and not the losers. And obviously, it depends who gets presented. And a lot of the media people on Twitter and social were saying, well, we're only presented with the winners, and the winners and losers of the main or co-main event if it's a big fight. So it's not really the media's fault why they don't get presented. And obviously, that's gonna hurt his chance when fight promotion does come along, because obviously a lot of the media won't be as fond of him. But obviously he's using his platform at the time to almost I guess make a change that the winners and losers, if they're fit and healthy enough to be interviewed, but both get interviewed. But again, it's become the norm now that only the winners we get of fights get interviewed by one John Anik or DC or Joe Rogan when he's there. And I think that's the right thing. Obviously, we've seen in the past, the infamous DC interview after the rematch with John Jones, where he's in tears and Joe Rogan goes up to interview him, and I think that's when Joe Rogan even said, "I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not interviewing those who have lost and those who have been knocked out. It's a bit immoral, a bit wrong." And I think that's the right step to go. But nonetheless, the Chirico's performance inside the octagon was a phenomenal one, and he's taken out a big name. Someone who was trending for a long time after that knockout win against Impa Kasanganay. But that moves us on nicely to Soriano and Todorovic, who opened the main card up. And Soriano, boy, did he get a good, fantastic win. Todorovic coming in thinking he was, Anderson Silva in his prime with a head movement, but he got caught like Anderson Silva did against Chris Weidman, and it doesn't work. You've got to keep your guard up. Obviously, he did look good for the first, 3 or 4 minutes of the fight. He did escape some of the punches, but eventually he got caught. We had another incident of the mouth guard falling in between the octagon gates and the canvas. Unfortunately, they had a second one on standby, so the fight continued. But shortly after, Soriano did get a knockout, and it was a fantastic knockout as well, and a good finish, a good stoppage, I think, from Herb Dean. I think was the referee for this one. But it was, again, fantastic way to open up the card, which, the prelims had, been stacked with decisions, albeit very close fights. Jocelyn Edwards getting wins, and we will take a look at the full results, of course. Carlos Felipe beat Justin Tafa by decision in what was a potential fight the night before the main event, of course, came in. Ramazan Emiyev versus defeated David Zavada. Vanessa Melo defeated Sarah Morris, and Austin Lingo beat Jacob Kilburn in the very first fight of 2021. So yes, a good card, albeit no submissions on the night, of course. A very boxing heavy card, or striking heavy card, should we say. But they did get 3 phenomenal finishes in that main card before what was probably fight of the year, albeit, we've only had one sample to go off this year so far. And I think that's a good place to wrap up there, guys. Obviously, we'll be back on Wednesday for the midweek card, Neil Magny versus Miguel Chiesa. And then we're on to the big boy this weekend, UFC 257, where Conor McGregor makes his return against Dustin Poirier. And it's going to be an incredible one. If you're watching all the interviews this week, the UFC Countdown show has been phenomenal. Ariel Helwani's interview with McGregor, phenomenal work again. And there's just something more special about McGregor fight with everyone's eyes and ears are more aware. You listen more to what's been said. You watch more, don't you? And you can see, if you watch the countdown, split down into 2 episodes. I think McGregor's is 39 minutes, and Dan Hooker and Michael Chandler's is 7 minutes. And that shows you just where the promotion into this weekend is going. We've also got Jessica Wright, Joanne Calderwood on there. It's a phenomenal card. Amanda Rivas is on there too after beating Paige VanZant. She's become a breakout star and someone to watch this year. But yes, I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure to hit like or follow on that Facebook channel. We're on the road to 2K followers now, and also we started on Twitch this week as well. So make sure to hit follow on there as well. But until Thursday, I'll see you guys on the next one.